Hello, and welcome to I Am Not For Everyone, the podcast for those looking to release shame, heal from trauma, and feel really, really good being their fully expressed, authentic selves. My name's Dr. Lee, and I am a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner and a certified clinical trauma professional, as well as a mom, wife, and a human being navigating the world with complex PTSD. Season 1 of this podcast came about because I was tired of spending decades living in a shame-filled, trauma-laden body and brain. And after doing a lot of work and learning how to return to a safe, grounded place in my life, I knew it was time for me to take my experience in education and use my voice to unsilence myself, to release the leftover shame, and to give others permission to do the same. On Season 2 of this podcast, I'm going to be sharing my experience in education. But even more importantly, I'm going to be bringing on some incredible guests who are going to unsilence themselves. They're going to share their own stories of trauma, shame, and their journeys to healing, resiliency, and self-acceptance. While I believe these episodes will be deeply impactful, I do want to add a disclaimer that we're going to be talking about some potentially triggering topics. So please take the invitation to pause or skip or fast forward on any episode, and to treat yourself gracefully and kindly after each time that you listen. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first training in here. I'm so excited. Just kind of getting myself set up. If you are watching live, I am a big fan of comments and engagement, interaction. I try my very hardest to pay attention to the comments throughout trainings that I do. Hi, Robin. I like to say hi to everyone who pops on live. And if you're watching on the replay, in my other group, which some people are in, we do #replay, which lets me know that you came on and you saw it, and I can come back and say hi to y'all and engage with you after the live is done. So, hey, Deborah. So I'm so excited to do this today. The way that this works is I'm going to come on weekly, where my plan is to come on here every Thursday at 11:30 Eastern. And some weeks that may change depending on what's going on personally or professionally. And my plan is to do this weekly. So, for those who don't know, I am a former professor. So I'm a really big fan of making sure that you are getting to learn what it is that you want to know. So I'm always open to topic ideas. If there's something that comes up for you in your personal or professional life, and you're like, ooh, I wonder how Dr. Lee would handle this, or like what she would have to say about this. Is there something that would be helpful for me to know for next time so this doesn't happen again, or so that can happen in a different way? Please, you can either send me a DM or you can make a post in the group and say, hey, I would love to learn this. There's a lot more people who just jumped on. So I was just saying, I love for the lives to be very interactive. I love to say hi to y'all. I love for you to ask questions, make comments. If there's something that really resonates with you, let me know so that I can expound upon it or make sure to address it again more. So, hey, Bianca. Hi, Kristen. Hi, Sadie. So a little about me for those of you who have not met me. My name is Dr. Lee Cordell. I am a nurse practitioner and a certified clinical trauma professional and a mom of 3 and a wife. And I also someone who has been diagnosed with complex PTSD and who has done a lot of her own therapy, a lot of her own work. And the purpose of this group, the purpose of these trainings are, before I did this work, before I underwent a lot of or entered into therapy, did a lot of the personal development work that I did, I felt really lost. And I had all of this medical and nursing and healthcare training. I had all of this training in academia. And I still felt like, I was like, gosh, there's something missing. Like there's got to be something else here that I don't know, that I, haven't learned yet, because like I am, I know all about lots of these areas, and I know a lot about, I prescribed anti-anxiety medications. I prescribed antidepressants. I prescribed a lot of things, especially as an acute care nurse practitioner. I took care of patients with delirium and a lot of patients with PTSD and trauma. And I was like, I'm missing something. there's got to be more here because I don't feel like I'm effectively helping people. And also I feel like myself, I'm struggling a lot. And so when I went through my own learning of becoming a certified clinical trauma professional and also on my own personal journey, I was like, you know what? We all need this. This is something that's not being taught in school, that's not being taught to us when we become parents, that's not really being shared on a public spectrum. And I thought, we need to get this out. We need to get this out. And so I created the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety to help support on at a higher level, at a more public level, in corporate, in academia, in healthcare, in parenting, in intimate relationships, a place where people could learn and a place where people could come and get empowered and get that information that was like the light bulb for me, both personally and professionally, so that they can go out and have safer, healthier relationships. So these weekly trainings are just that. They are a way for you to learn more, and hopefully some light bulbs are going to go off. Hopefully you're going to go, oh, that's why I do what I do. Or that's why my body acts the way that it does in certain situations. And my brain starts thinking things in certain scenarios. That's why. That is my goal and my hope for you in this group, is for you to really walk away with information that helps you in your daily life, both inside of yourself and externally in the relationships that you're in. So before we can really get into some of this like super cool, juicy, exciting, like, oh, this makes such a difference information, I really want to start with defining and having a conversation around some of these core concepts that are really helpful for us to understand when we talk about being trauma informed, when we talk about being psychologically safe. And even those terms, they're big buzzwords right now. Trauma awareness, trauma informed. Some of y'all might not even know what that means. And if you don't, great, you're in the right place. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to talk about it. And these words are getting thrown around a lot in like employee trainings. I've seen a lot of Facebook ads, which they're probably just targeted to me now because I talk about trauma-informed and psychologically safe spaces all the time now. But like I'm seeing these things start to come out more and more, which is great. And we want to make sure that we actually understand what that means. So if somebody starts talking about trauma-informed care or talking about being trauma-aware, and you're listening and you're going, I don't actually think that's what this is. You can discern that. You can make that distinction for yourself, because a lot of people are using this term and a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, I'm a trauma aware coach, or I took trauma informed trainings, and like really making sure that what they are saying, that they understand is the actual thing. And also I want you to be able to say, yes, I am trauma informed. Yes, I do create psychologically safe spaces. And you know what that means. And if someone says, okay, what does that mean? You can explain it. So what is trauma? So when we talk about what trauma, there's a couple definitions out there. And the way that I like to explain this is I want you to think of capital T trauma and lowercase t trauma. Okay. So capital T trauma is what we typically think of as trauma, right? I was an acute care nurse practitioner. I stayed on the medical side of things. I tried not to go, if you saw me in an OR, like something was seriously wrong. But, when we think of trauma, we think of Grey's Anatomy, the ortho docs, the people who are in car accidents, or the people who have physical damage done to their bodies, and that also experience psychological damage as a result of that traumatic experience. So big T traumas, I like to describe as the sledgehammer, right? They are the thing that a lot of times come out of nowhere. They stop you in your tracks. There is a fundamental before and after. Okay. There's a fundamental before the trauma and after the trauma. And people can tell you that exact moment that thing happened. Little T traumas are different. If big T traumas are the sledgehammers, little T traumas are paper cuts. Okay. Little T traumas are paper cuts. And what I mean by that is they're the small, tiny, or kind of small things that happen to us on a consistent basis that make us feel psychologically unsafe or make our bodies feel unsafe in a way, but there's not necessarily physical damage done. So this could be the child who's bullied, right? I had a nasty bullying experience in fourth grade. And, no one hit me, no one pushed me, none of those things happened. And also, there was a lot of psychological unsafety that went along with that. There was hiding at recess so that I didn't see the girls that were mean. There was controlling when I sat in class so that when they were when class was over, I didn't have to hear them mocking me in the hallway about what my answers were, right? Those are little T traumas. There's nothing that happened in that where it's like, oh my gosh, my body was unsafe, right? Where I felt like somebody was going to physically harm me. And yet, my body felt unsafe. My soul felt unsafe. I didn't feel accepted. I didn't feel loved. And I didn't feel like I could show up as my full authentic self and have that be okay. And that, my friends, is psychological safety, right? I think a lot of us understand what physical safety is. Physical safety, and I love this definition from an international board in Quebec. So physical safety is where we control physical hazards or conditions that lead to physical or material harm. And we promote health and well-being of individuals. So physical safety is my body is not there. The likelihood of my body undergoing harm is low enough that I feel safe doing what I'm doing. Okay. We all have different levels of physical safety, right? I hate roller coasters. Roller coasters feel physically unsafe to me versus my husband loves roller coasters. Roller coasters feel very physically safe to him, right? Psychological safety has to do with if we feel like we can fully and authentically show up as ourselves and have that be okay. And I wasn't planning on talking about shame here. I'm the anti-shame coach. That's my branding. As a personal coach and consultant, I help people release shame, which is directly tied to trauma. But psychological safety and shame are so closely tied together because so often shame develops when we express ourselves in a specific way that feels authentic and aligned with who we are, with our personality, with our character, and somebody tells us that that's wrong or bad, or that we should literally be ashamed of ourselves. You heard that term? Have you said that term? That's a term that is stricken from my vocabulary permanently, and I encourage my students to do the same. Encouraging people to be ashamed of themselves is saying, I want you to cut off this piece or part of you that I don't accept. So I think you can look around, maybe actually in the physical space that you're in right now, or on social media, or in the news, or, on the street right now. Psychological safety, not very high in our current society. And so this is one of our missions. This is why this is such a huge part of our mission, is because think about how good social media feels right now. Think about how good watching the news feels right now. Think about how good interacting with somebody in certain scenarios where you're doing one action and they're doing another, and those two actions have been pitted against each other. And there's some division happening instead of just simple disagreement. Not a lot of psychological safety going on right now. So when I talk about feeling safe, we are talking about physical safety. And what I want you to understand is that when we feel psychologically unsafe, that creates the release of hormones, the release of neurotransmitters, the release of other chemicals in our body that tell our body also that we are not physically safe. So when we talk about creating psychological safety, what I want you to hear is though, even though we're talking about creating safety for the soul, safety for the brain, we're also creating safety in our nervous systems, which connect directly to our body. And that changes how we feel. And one of the really cool things about trauma work is that we can take a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach, meaning I can work with you to feel psychologically safe in your brain. And that will change the way that your brain talks to your body. That will change the way that chemicals are released in your body. And I can work with your body. We can work with your body and create a sense of safety in your body. And that's going to change your thoughts. That's going to change the messages that your brain sends you. And by the way, all of this is based on a concept called metacognition. Okay. Metacognition means that we can think about our own thinking. We as humans have this amazing thing called a prefrontal cortex or a neocortex. It sits right at the front of your brain. And it's something that, as far as we know, no other animal on the planet has. And what our neocortex, our prefrontal cortex, allows us to do is to think rationally, reasonably, and logically, and to think about our own thinking. And one of the interesting things that happens when we don't feel psychologically safe or when we don't feel physically safe is that this goes offline. It literally stops working. Your brain shunts blood away from here to more primitive systems in your brain, the amygdala, the limbic system. And what happens with that is that we go into fear-based patterns. We go into fear-based patterns. And this is why maybe you've lost it. You lost your cool on somebody once and you walk out and you're like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know why that happened. Maybe you yelled at your kid. Maybe you yelled at your partner. Maybe you broke down into tears in a place where you really didn't want to, in front of your boss or in front of a colleague. Maybe you got road rage. And when it's all said and done, you're like, oh, I don't even know why I acted that way. It's because you weren't thinking. You weren't able to think about your own thinking at that point. And so a lot of what we do in becoming trauma informed and in doing trauma work is we learn how to recognize when that's happening and come back into our bodies and come back and get this neocortex back online. So that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about moving forward. And for those of you who are like, I need to learn how to do this right now, like I need this. We've actually uploaded, and I think we have, I'm going to double check with Sarah, my director of operations. We are uploading something called the Easy Method Guide. This is a method that I developed that is a way to, when we get emotionally activated, when we have all those feelings come up, and when the prefrontal cortex comes offline, it's a way to bring it back on. It's a way to turn it back on and connect back in and think about your thinking and choose different choices. So if that is something that interests you, we will make sure that's in the guide section of the Facebook group. So we've defined trauma and we've defined safety. The other thing I want to say about trauma before we get into talking about pleasure is that trauma, when we go through something traumatic, thank you, Sarah. When we go through something traumatic, we have a couple different options of how we process that. So we're animals. We are animals. As much as we pretend we're not, we are animals. And when you look in nature, when animals go through a highly traumatic thing, right? When their physical safety is in danger, think of the gazelle, right? That gets chased by the lion. When they use various tactics, evolutionary tactics to survive that lion chase, which we'll talk about in another video. We'll talk about the 4 Fs. We'll do that next week. That's a good place to start next week. When we talk about the 4 Fs, these are things that the gazelle or any animal uses to try to survive when their life is threatened. Okay. When that gazelle survives, if and when that gazelle survives, if you watch that animal when it's done, you will watch it go through a physical transformation and you will watch it literally start to shake and almost vibrate. Its body does this. And you might have even seen your dog do this. Has anyone ever seen your dog do this during a thunderstorm? Right? What your dog is doing, what that gazelle is doing, is actively moving the neurochemicals and the trauma through the body. It is discharging the literal electrical and neurochemical charge that built up during that very stressful event, and it's moving it through and out of its body. That trembling actually helps get those chemicals into the bloodstream so that they can be urinated out, so that they can be eliminated through the body. But there's action, there's movement. And here's the interesting thing about humans. A lot of us have been conditioned. We've been taught to actively avoid the discharge of trauma. So, what does that mean? That means that when I'm a little kid and something scary happens and I start fidgeting and my nervous system is all dysregulated and my parent says, sit still or I'm gonna tie you to that chair. Or if you don't sit still, something bad is gonna happen. And I'm shamed, right? And so I sit still because my physical safety depends on me sitting still. Or my psychological safety depends on me sitting still. My fitting into this family depends on me sitting still. I don't have the chance to discharge that trauma. Some other forms of discharge, which you might have seen in some interesting ways, is laughing when you're really upset. Anyone ever seen someone or anyone ever experienced that when they're really upset and all of a sudden you are just laughing? And then all of a sudden you're crying? That is discharge. That is your body moving this through. But so often when we undergo something, let's say at work where our boss yells at us, right? We contract in, we don't say anything, we get really quiet, we sit still in that chair and we sit through the entire meeting. And then by the time it's over, the chance to move that through is gone. And so all of us have these built up experiences where we experienced a little t trauma or maybe a big T trauma where we were pinned down or we were immobile. We weren't able to get away or we froze. And after that trauma, we weren't able to move. We weren't able to do actions that helped us get that out of our body. And what happens is that those neurochemicals get stuck in our tissues, in our fascia, which is like the pantyhose-like surrounding of all of our muscles. And the other thing that happens, especially with traumas that like those 1,000 tiny paper cuts that happen over and over and over, our nervous system learns a pattern. Our nervous system learns a pattern. And it stores and it stores and it stores and it stores and it relearns and it relearns and it relearns. And all of a sudden we're an adult in very different life situations, and yet we are having responses to things that remind our brain of traumas in the past, and our body goes, oh, I know what this is. This is the response I need to have. So oftentimes I hear people talk about trauma and safety on opposite ends of a spectrum. And this is really what I want to get into today for y'all. Trauma and safety are not on opposite ends of the spectrum. There's a further point to the spectrum. What I want you to hear is when I talk about someone being traumatized or I talk about trauma, what I am saying is the stuckness in your body, the trauma that still lives inside of here. Bessel van der Kolk, famous trauma doc, says the body keeps the score. And so many of us are walking around with all of these wounds from when we were younger that have not had a chance to heal, that we have not had a chance to release the trauma in our body. And so I don't say that we heal from trauma. I say we release the trauma and then we are able to heal. Because until we get that out, our body is going to remember. And this is why so often we do all of these brain-based, mental-based therapies and all of these treatments where we try to help you think differently, where we try to, change your mindset, and we're doing nothing here. And people are like, I've been in therapy for years, or I've been doing the X thing for a decade and it's not working. I've been taking this medicine for, several months and it's not helping. This is one of the reasons why. And so when we talk about trauma and safety is helping our nervous system understand and relearn what it knew when you were born. Creating psychological and physical safety in your body again is simply a remembrance. It is a remembrance of who you were before you underwent trauma. And if trauma is a not feeling good state, it is a dysregulated state. Safety is neutral. Safety is, okay, I feel like I can show up as myself, and I feel like I can create that safety for myself. Even if somebody tries to take that safety away, even if somebody tries to shame me, even if somebody tries to make me feel bad about who I am, I can create that safety for myself. And then from there, we can focus on pleasure. And pleasure is one of those words. It's kind of like, it's a loaded word, right? It's tied to a lot of different things. A lot of people hear that word and their brain immediately goes to sex. Absolutely, it's tied to that. And what the word pleasure means is simply enjoyment, is gratification and satisfaction. And here is like one of the big points that I want to make about pleasure. So many of us think that we are chasing pleasure, right? We think that we are creating pleasure in our lives. And what we are actually doing is following these habits, these feedback loops that I talked about that got created when we were younger, right? We're following those. And what we are doing is trying to numb or alleviate these symptoms and calling that pleasure. So we are still in a dysregulated state, telling ourselves that we feel good, and we really don't, because the safety isn't there. This is why people do drugs. This is why people drink alcohol in excess. This is why people will violate their morals and values to do things that bring them physical comfort. This is why people will gamble. This is why people shop and spend more money than they have online. This is why people will go through serial relationships or have multiple sexual partners in an unsafe or unconscious way. Not that anything I just said there, not that any of those things I said should make you feel shame or guilt if you are participating in those. Please hear me on this. None of those things are bad, necessarily. None of them. And if we are using them while in a dysregulated state to try to make our bodies feel better, and the safety is not present, these are numbing and dissociating tools that we're using. So, what is pleasure? Pleasure is doing things that feel good now and will feel good later, that align with our morals and values, and that are done from a calm, regulated state, are done from a state where our body feels good and our brain feels good. So, this can get kind of nuanced, right? It's the difference between drinking 2 to 3 glasses of wine after work because you need that in order to be able to unwind, to be able to deal with kids, to be able to put them to bed, and be able to make dinner and plan for things the next day, and sitting down and like savoring 2 glasses of wine because you love the way that it feels on your tongue. And it's like reminds you of a memory of drinking wine on a patio in Venice. And it feels good. It's not an escape route. It's not something to take you away. It's something that helps you drop in even more to the experience that you're having into your body. It's not taking you out of your body. Okay. So that is what I wanted to cover today is what trauma means, what physical and psychologically safety mean, and what pleasure really looks like. And so my invitation for you this week is to really start looking at and paying attention to and becoming more aware of these concepts in your daily life. I want you to start leaning and noticing, where do I feel like I can show up fully, authentically, like as my whole self? And where do I feel like I'm hiding pieces and parts of myself? Are there certain people that I hide with or in front of? Are there certain people that do feel really safe, that I feel like I can let my guard down and tell them anything and everything and they'll still accept me? Do I have some big T's or some little T's in my past that, I like kind of wrote off? And this is the other thing I want to say is, so many of us, when I ask this question in groups and rooms, I'm like, who here would identify as somebody who has trauma? Like, so few people will raise their hands. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a hospital setting or, talking to, I've worked with private security firms and talked to them, like, who feels like, they've gone through trauma. Like, none of them raise their hands. And what I want you to hear is this, is like, everybody has trauma. You are normal if you have trauma. You're normal if you've stored that somewhere in your body. And this is a lifelong process, right? One of the really cool things that our brain does is it doesn't show us memories of trauma if it feels like it's going to dysregulate us too much or send us to a really unsafe place. This is why people will start to do some of this work and then they'll get in, they're like, oh my gosh, I just had this memory pop up and it was like, I completely forgot about this. But this was really traumatic. I'm like, great, beautiful. That means that your brain and your body decided that you felt safe enough that you could deal with this, that you could learn from this, that you could release this. So if there are things that you remember, awesome. That means that if you can remember them and if they're starting to cause symptoms, your brain and body are a self-healing machine. So again, your brain and body are a self-healing machine. Your body is designed to heal itself. It's one of the coolest things about the human body, right? It is designed to fix itself. And we forget that so much with modern medicine and with healthcare, but that is how it is designed. And so if you are starting to have things pop up or you know of someone who's having things pop up, that's a great sign. It means the body's trying to heal itself. And so we get to use some of these tips and techniques to do that. And what I will also say is this. I said this in the intro video. We are not doing therapy in here. I am not a therapist. We are not going to be processing through significant traumas together necessarily. You may be doing that on your own, and that's great. And this is a group for coaching. This is a group for community. This is a group for you to be able to feel safe and seen. And also, if in watching any of these videos, you start to feel some of these symptoms, you start to feel uncomfortable, you start to feel distressed, please, if you are not well resourced, reach out so that we can help you get well resourced, okay? And also, just know, that might mean that it's time to find somebody who is a specialist in trauma, who can do that therapy with you so that you can be fully safe, feel fully safe and fully supported. And I say that as somebody who has had multiple instances in my life where it was like, you know what, I'm very well resourced and I need more help. So while we are not going to be addressing any of that in this group, this is not a group for therapy. I'm very clear on that. I like to keep my nursing license. This is also a space where if you are going through these things and you feel well resourced, you feel well supported, please come in. We're going to be talking about a lot of these things. And if, like I said, you feel like you need more support and you're not sure where to find that, that's a great point to reach out and we'll try to direct you to somewhere or help you find somebody that can help you. Okay. So full permission after watching this, because this was a lot, full permission to do some grounding techniques. One of my absolute favorites is to just take my shoes off underneath of my desk and practice feeling each of the knuckles in my toes on the floor and stretching out, tucking my toes under and pushing them against the floor and then putting them back out and flexing my feet up. Really great grounding exercise. Even better if you can get outside and do that in the grass. On the ground. Maybe you need to take some deep breaths. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to chat with someone. whatever you need to feel to bring your body back into an aligned, grounded space as much as possible. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments now. I can stay on for a few more minutes and answer those. Yeah, smiling and laughing when we're uncomfortable. We're going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about some what trauma responses and trauma expressions are so that you can recognize them. So often when you see, this is one of the realizations I had when I learned about trauma is whenever I see another human do something and I'm like, what the heck was that? Like, that was not an expected response, right? My brain goes, wonder what they've been through, right? Whenever anyone overreacts or underreacts, which, by the way, I don't believe in those terms. I mean, not that I don't believe in them. Those terms exist. I don't like to use those terms. Overreaction versus underreaction, over emotional versus under emotional. There's no such thing. Every reaction is valid. Every emotion or expression of emotion is for a reason. It's just not likely coming from a regulated nervous system. And so it doesn't make sense to you. It doesn't look normal to you because you are regulated in that moment. Or they have a different form of expressing their trauma than you do. So if you're watching the replay and you have questions, please drop those below. Feel free to DM me with any thoughts, anything that you'd like to hear more about, any musings, and also feel free to tell me like your biggest takeaway from this so that we can use that and incorporate it into further trainings and teachings. So yes, happy Thursday. Go do something good for yourself. And we will see you in the group. Thank y'all so much for taking time out of your busy day to listen to our episode. If it resonated with you, we'd absolutely love it if you'd give us a rating in the App Store or if you'd share the episode with a friend or two. And if you're looking for even more resources, community, and education around what it means to be trauma-informed and to live a psychologically safe life, we would absolutely love to have you join us in our free Facebook community, Becoming Trauma Informed. You can find the information in the show notes, and we're so excited to welcome you into our community.